Hey, comunidad. Hey, familia. It is so important that we have come together today because it is an important occasion, but it is certainly not a happy occasion. We are gathering today because it is Latina Equal Pay Day. It is a day that we observe nationally because it is the day that Latinas finally catch up to what white male workers were paid in the prior calendar year. I'm Monica Ramirez. I'm the founder of Justice for Migrant Women, and I've had the honor of helping to lead this national Latina Equal Pay campaign now for 6 years. It's hard to believe. And I've had an opportunity to do that in partnership with my good friends at Equal Pay Today, with LACLA, the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement, and with so many other organizations around the country who are trying to raise awareness about this issue. This day is such a critical day for us to not just talk about the problem of the pay gap confronting Latinas, but it's an important day for us to talk about what we're going to do to solve the problem. So just in case you hadn't heard, this year, the data tells us that Latinas are being paid just 57 cents to every dollar paid to our white male counterparts. And we know that this data, it actually doesn't tell the full story. On today's program, we're going to hear more about what that data means, and we're going to learn more about what is missing from the numbers that we currently have. But for now, it's important for us to remember that Latinas have to work an additional 10 months in order to catch up to our white male counterparts. That's right, you heard it. We have to work 22 months to make what white male workers are paid in just 12. We all know this is not right, it is not equal, and it is certainly not equitable. During this program, you're going to hear from a variety of individuals. They are advocates, they are activists, they are change makers, and all of them have something very important to say. But we're here today because we have a message in common, and the message is that we're not going to take this anymore, and it's going to take all of us to address this problem. At my organization, Justice for Migrant Women, we seek to serve and uphold the rights of migrant women workers across our country. Many of these migrant women workers are frontline workers, essential workers. They continue to work throughout this pandemic, and we know that essential women workers have been gravely impacted during the pandemic. That's why we're not only going to talk about how Latinas have been affected generally by the pay gap now or in the last couple of years, we're going to talk about how certain Latinas have been impacted adversely because of the pandemic and their jobs. So during this first portion of the program, we'll hear generally about Latina Equal Pay, how we're not being paid what we should be paid, and how it's impacted us as a whole. But in the later portion of our program, we're going to learn more about how essential women workers have been impacted, including Latina workers. So please stay tuned for all that's in store. We have so much more to say about this topic, and it's my honor and pleasure to introduce you to my friend and my colleague in this work, Shannon Williams. She is the fierce leader of Equal Pay Today, and she's going to share a little bit more about what this Equal Pay Day represents and some of what we're going to be discussing in the program.
Thanks, Monica. And I'm Shannon Williams, the director of the Equal Pay Today campaign, a project of equal rights advocates. Launched on the 50th anniversary of the signing of the Federal Equal Pay Act, the campaign is an innovative collaboration of national and state-based advocacy organizations and was created to challenge the legal, policy, and cultural barriers at the local, state, and national level that keep women from achieving equal pay. Keeping in line with the start of this pandemic, this year continues to be very challenging. We find ourselves sitting at the intersection of 3 different crises. We are still in the midst of the worst health crisis of our generation, where Black and Brown people are continuously being impacted at numbers that are disproportionate from any other demographic. Our country has beyond reached a tipping point in terms of our centuries-old relationship with systemic racism and racial injustice, and our economy has definitely seen better days. According to a report released from the Association of American University Women, Latinas make up 3 out of 10 frontline workers and are huge contributors to keeping our country running during this time. Latinas also lead in another area as well. Between February and May of 2020, Latinas experienced the largest decline in employment than any other group, men or women, with 21% of Latinas losing their jobs, compared to just 9% of white non-Hispanic men who lost their jobs during the period. In fact, as of the beginning of 2021, there were still 633,000 fewer Latinas in the workforce than in the beginning of 2019. The impacts on Latinas and their families are very serious. Just listen to this.
1 in 5 Latinas were unemployed in April of 2020. And although the unemployment numbers are starting to decrease, Latinas still sit at 7.3% unemployment just as of March of 2021. As it stands, at that current rate, it will take Latinas until approximately the year 2451. Yes, I said it correctly, 2451, to close the wage gap. And while there are a number of factors that serve as a foundation of these years, occupational segregation is one that we cannot ignore, especially when we still find ourselves in the middle of a pandemic. Latinas are overrepresented in low-paying service jobs all over this country, being twice as likely to work these jobs than their white, non-Hispanic women counterparts. Why is this such an interesting fact during a global pandemic? Because with this, only 16.2% of Latinas even had the option to work from home before the pandemic, making them susceptible to and more likely to lose their job.
And already consistently, unfair low wages, coupled with the economic issues highlighted by the pandemic, have shined a light on the vulnerability of low-paid workers, a fact that will play a role in the widening of the wage gap for years and decades to come. Because of the wage gap suffered by Latinas, they will stand to lose over $1 million in earnings over the course of a 40-year career. Think about that, $1 million. Think what that means for your family, your community, and your quality of life. But we also know that these calculations do not tell the full story of all of us as Latinas, including Afro-Black Latina women like me. For many of us, the wage is even wider, which we know is a direct consequence of gender inequity, racism, sexism, and hypercapitalism.
As we know, trans Latinas continue to experience challenges while trying to access employment and discriminated against. And obviously, we are one of the most poor populations in this country. And so we need to do better to include trans women as the women that we are, and certainly to have an equal pay day for all of us, for all women, for all Latino women.
So we'd like to invite you all to enjoy our digital Latina Equal Pay Day event as we amplify and observe and draw awareness to this day. This high-energy packed event will include a host of Latinx leaders, Latinx community members, workers, civil rights leaders, advocates, students, union members, labor leaders, the business community, entertainers, and of course, you. So sit back and enjoy, and afterwards get ready to stand up and raise your voice as we observe Latina Equal Pay Day.
Thank you, Monica and Shannon, for your kind introduction and for inviting me to join you as the host of this year's National Latina Equal Pay Day Virtual Summit. I am truly honored, so thank you. As an actor and an activist, I am thrilled to be your MC as we honor the power of Latinas across the country. Latinas are the center of our families, our workplaces, and our communities. It goes without saying that Latinas make innumerable contributions every single day. Unfortunately, as we have already heard today, Latinas are not being paid fully for all that we do to hold up the country and to make so many industries thrive. And it's not just Latinas who are facing a pay gap either. Women across the board are not being paid fully and fairly for our work. And by women, we mean all who identify as women. This must end. And we are so fortunate that you are joining in with us as we learn more about this problem and its impact on Latinas, not to mention our families. Today, we center the communities making change in this country and those most impacted by inequities. We are grateful to all of the people, the incredible individuals who have lent their voices, their time, and their insight to make today's program wonderful, powerful, informative, and engaging. So without further ado, let's get started. First up, we'll be hearing from Jessica Herrera Flanagan, who is VP in Public Policy and Philanthropy for the Americas at Twitter. Twitter is proud to help power the Latina Equal Pay Day social media campaign, and we are grateful for their support. Welcome, Jessica.
On behalf of Twitter, we are proud to support this year's Latina Equal Pay Twitter Storm. We are also pleased to join the Justice for Migrant Women and the Equal Pay Today Coalition for the National Charla. We are proud to honor the work and many contributions of Latinas at Twitter and all Latina workers. I hope you enjoy the summit.
Years of night cleaning. Before that, while the boy was small, she stayed home with him and babysat other people's children. All day, huerco screaming. She went deaf in one ear. That's why a person reached middle age like a cat with 9 lives that was patched and one-eyed. It took that many to survive the atrocities of daily banality. Otherwise, her health was good. It has to be, she'd say, since there was no insurance to speak of, just deductions to pay for bombs, bursting prisons, and other people's retirements. It was how she saw it. No apologies to the politically correct. The privileged could worry about oil prices. She worried about the gas bill, her son's college fees, the fact that both of her parents died before age 50, with bodies burned out from lifetimes of produce picking, her youngest brother stillborn without arms, a result of her mother's exposure to pesticides sprayed by crop dusters as she labored below. Among the millions who come to keep things going, put strawberries on dinner tables in midwinter, landscape front yards and gardens without much haggling in case you get mad and call immigration. In restaurants, we don't offend customers by taking their orders, but are hired only to keep the water glasses filled. We wash the dishes of America. We wash hotel linen, cars, people's babies. We clean anything. Whatever dirty job, in other words, that has to be done is ours for the asking. How else to explain why we find work when the economy is down and unemployment lines keep growing? Must have something to do with the lack of benefits a God-forsaken cabron must live with. Just because I know how the system works doesn't mean I can do anything about it.
Our first flash talk of the afternoon is led by Veronica Segovia Bedon, Senior Advisor for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion and Latino-Hispanic Audience Chair at AARP, who will be further discussing the Latina pay equity gap.
It is an honor to be speaking here on Latina Equal Pay Day on behalf of AARP. Thank you, Monica, for putting on this event, which is so needed in today's economic climate. Unfortunately, the playing field in the workforce is not equal for women. Women make up 2/3 of the workforce, and we are twice as likely as men to work part-time jobs. We make less than our male counterparts do, and over the course of our lifetimes, we tend to accrue both fewer years of paid earnings and lower career earnings. As many of us at one point or another have had to take a pause in our careers to take care of our family members. Statistically, as Latinas, we have it the worst. We have the highest life expectancy rate at 84 years, which is great, yet we are paid just 57 cents on the dollar that a white male non-Hispanic earns. The cumulative impact of the wage gap for Latinas with bachelor degrees could mean a loss of more than $1 million over a 40-year career. We as Latinas are at higher risk of outliving our assets and living in poverty later in life than any other demographic. That is our current reality, but it does not need to be our future. Like Monica, AARP is working to ensure that we have a brighter future with more secure financial resilience so that we can have the freedom to choose how we live as we age. We are fighting to protect the Social Security benefits we've earned and pushing initiatives like our Work and Save program to help employers provide an easy pathway and access for our workers to grow their retirement savings. This should prove to be especially advantageous for Latinas. Our studies have found that out of any other demographic, Latinas earning between $75,000 and $100,000 a year have the highest participation rates in their employer retirement plans. AARP also provides free tools and resources to help you work, plan, and save for retirement. The AARP Job Board, Resume Advisor, Skill Builder for Work, and Small Business Resource Center were all designed to help those over 50 thrive in the workforce, however they choose. On AARP.org, our Work and Jobs section is full of content offering expert advice, information, and resources on a number of topics, from upskilling and reskilling to remain competitive in today's job market, to fact sheets and tips on age discrimination and salary negotiations, so you can advocate for yourself no matter what comes your way. I want to thank all of you for giving me the opportunity today, and I encourage you to explore all of the ways that AARP can help. AARP is here to help you grow your wealth and secure a financial future so that you can own it and ensure it's filled with salud, dinero, y amor.
Now let's give a warm welcome to Daisy Auger Dominguez, Chief People Officer at Vice Media. Daisy will be presenting the second Flash Talk focused on how companies can make sure to build back better for their Latina employees.
Everyone has a relationship to work. It is how we get paid and are able to put food in our children's bellies. Some people experience the workplace as it should be, challenging. It is work after all, and rewarding if you're lucky. For others, the same workplace is overlaid with microaggressions, gender violence, systemic racism, outright discrimination, and the nagging feeling that you're going crazy as you try to get through each day. I've dedicated my career to making workplaces more inclusive and equitable because I know firsthand that when Latinas are given access and opportunity to thrive, communities, companies, and economies are better for it. Diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace is one of the most important business issues of our time. We can't talk about equity in work and not address the persistent barriers that Latinas face each and every day. Historical barriers to the economic security and professional advancement of Latinas have included language, citizenship status, and lack of access to higher education. But today's Latinx professionals, and women in particular, are better educated and prepared to advance in their careers than ever before. Yet, for over 2 decades, I have watched countless Latinas sidelined and marginalized in workplaces that routinely discount their background, ideas, and experiences. Despite being one of the fastest growing groups of women in the US labor force, Latinx women represent less than 1% of executives and less than 2% of board directors for Fortune 100 plus companies. That is according to the Hispanic Association of Corporate Responsibility's 2021 Corporate Inclusion Index. Lean In and McKinsey and Company just released the 7th edition of Women in the Workplace, the largest study on the state of women in corporate America. The results indicate that despite a growing commitment to racial equity across all industries, the experiences of women of color are not improving. Women of color face similar types and frequencies of microaggressions as they did 2 years ago, and they remain far more likely than white women to face disrespectful and othering behavior. And despite all the talk about allyship, they found that those who call themselves allies are not speaking out against discrimination or mentoring or sponsoring enough women of color, or even taking the actions necessary to advocate for them. A thing effective leaders know is that every team goes faster when the path is clear. But companies have failed to build clear paths for Latinas, who often fall outside of the boundaries of the groups who decide who gets hired or selected for career-making assignments. This social and professional exclusion stalls career advancement and holds back talented Latinas across every industry. This points to the critical need for companies to not just equip employees at all levels to challenge bias and to show up as allies, but to actively dismantle inequities across their organizations by keeping their Latinx talent, understanding Latino and Hispanic identity, and shaping new leadership norms. So how do we keep them? Hiring people from underrepresented groups isn't enough. All of your employees need to feel safe, valued, and respected, and they need to genuinely believe they can have a successful career at your company. Latinx employees are still, in many ways, trying to navigate workplaces that were not created with them in mind. Leaders and managers need to ensure that Latinx women genuinely believe that they can have a successful career at their organization. Instead of making grand gestures about the value of increasing the ranks of Latina talent in your organization, you should be intentionally supporting and nurturing them by understanding what is tripping them up, what are their unique advantages, and how you can reduce obstacles to their success. With that information, you can build an inclusive, equity-minded organization where Latinx employees stay and thrive because of safe, fair, and dignified structures, processes, and organizational norms. What does it take to understand Latinx identity? A now dated yet still relevant report by COQUAL, formerly the Center for Talent Innovation, entitled Latinos at Work, revealed that a full 43% of Latinx females felt the need to compromise their authenticity to conform to executive or leadership presence standards at their companies. I know this to be true because I've experienced it myself. Latinas consistently report having to sacrifice aspects of themselves in order to fit in, from changing their appearance, their accents, to toning down their emotions so that they can survive in workplaces. That's exhausting, not to mention a waste for companies eager to set themselves apart from their ever-competitive set. Shape new leadership norms. Leadership means being intentional in using your power and influence to remove barriers and clear the advancement path for all employees. This is not about virtue signaling or performative allyship, but rather about removing the obstacles that stand in their way. Today, I challenge you to exercise real courage in dismantling workplace barriers that limit the full inclusion and success of Latinas in your organization by focusing on keeping them in the workplace, understanding what they need to be successful, and shaping new leadership norms. Thank you.
Women in general are stereotyped as the weaker sex. That's changing, and I think it's alarming a lot of people.
Standing here at the water's edge, and I scream into the ocean my grief, all the emotions of my mother's mother's mother, and so on. And I wonder how their fight became mine. But we're survivors, and we'll rise up. They say we're too loud, they try to drown us out. We've just begun, it's their turn to listen. We won't stay quiet. These mujeres will riot. No me quedaré calladita. No me quedaré tranquila. I've seen what grandfathers give grandsons, their pocket watches, army knives, guns. But what women pass on each generation is advice on self-preservation.
And now for the third Flash Talk, we'll be learning about the difference being in a union makes in the Latina pay gap, led by Evelyn de Jesus, Secretary Treasurer of the Labor Council for Latin American Advancement and Executive Vice President of the American Federation of Teachers.
Even though we are in the year 2021, women who work full-time and year-round are still paid significantly less than men. For Latino workers, this pay gap is the worst in the country. And when we look at how much extra time a Latina would have to work to make the same as a white man, it comes out to nearly 10 months. That is why we celebrate Latino Equal Pay Day on October 21st, because that is when the average Latina would have to work until to earn the same as the average white man did in 2020 alone. One cause of the pay gap is direct discrimination, where employers simply offer a lower salary to women when they would to a man doing the same work. But there are also structural inequalities that lead to women working lower paid jobs or having more difficult being promoted. By far, the most visible structural inequality has to do with women's role in the care work in the home. This can include childcare as well as housework and caring for elderly or dependent relatives. Women in general, but especially Latina women, often do most of this work, which can affect their performance at work. Mothers especially face a disadvantage when it comes to the pay gap because many are not given enough paid maternity leave and many are discriminated against when re-entering the workforce. In order to close the pay gap, we need to make sure that women are paid equally for equal work, that their roles as caretakers are balanced with other members of the family, and that maternity leave and women's health are appropriately covered in employer contracts and benefits. As you know, unions have one of the most important roles in closing the pay gap because they are the primary means by which workers can come together to level the playing field between themselves and their employers. And since Latino workers are found disproportionately in low-wage jobs with few benefits, unions also help Latinas close the pay gap by allowing them to negotiate the higher wages they deserve. That is why union women earn 22.6% more than non-union women on average, which makes for an extra $195 per week for union Latinas. This number is even higher at 38% higher earnings compared to non-union Latinas. And this is true in every sector of the economy. We do know that union women as a group earn 87.3 cents on the dollar compared to union men, while non-union women make 82 cents on the dollar compared to non-union men, which makes for a significantly smaller pay gap for union women. Since union membership helps close the pay gap for both Latinos and women as groups, it is especially beneficial for Latina workers who fall into both of these categories.
For the next Flash Talk of the event, let's hear from Valeria Treves, Advisor for Worker Voice Engagement at the Department of Labor, who is here to remind us about the collective power Latinas hold when it comes to pushing and leading the change our communities desire. Welcome.
It is my pleasure to be part of this year's National Latina Equal Pay Day and Essential Women Workers Virtual Summit. Before joining the Department of Labor, I dedicated my career to building worker power in our communities through community organizing and grassroots advocacy, and by supporting burgeoning new strategies for worker organizing by labor unions and worker centers. Throughout history, Latinas have been leading and organizing in our workplaces, our homes, our communities, sometimes in large-scale campaigns and sometimes in small grassroots actions. These have resulted in improved working conditions, more equitable policies, and better futures for our communities. But our work is far from done. Latina Equal Pay Day is an opportunity not only to talk about equal pay for equal work, but it is also an opportunity to recommit to something that I really believe in, which is the efforts to make every single job into a good job. Imagine the impact that that would have on Latinas across the country. Let's look at the sectors of the US economy where Latinas are overrepresented but making low wages. For example, care work, including childcare and elderly care, farm work, household work, retail, and hospitality. As a Latinx community, we know that this is important work and it should be valued. During the pandemic, many others began to see that too. On Latina Equal Pay Day, we can recommit to up-waging these sectors so that workers receive the pay, the protection, and the benefits that they deserve in these jobs. On Latina Equal Pay Day, we can also recommit to holding employers accountable. There should be no room in our system for employers that commit wage theft, for employers that don't uphold health and safety standards, or employers that threaten, harass, exploit, or commit violence against workers, or employers that interfere with their right to organize. Finally, on Latina Equal Pay Day, we can recommit to building labor unions and worker organizations that are going to support workers in their plight for safety and dignity on the job. Alongside equal pay for equal work, building the care infrastructure, and other pro-worker policies, these three strategies that I mentioned, upwaging, holding employers accountable, and supporting the growth of labor unions, these are all priorities of the Department of Labor and of the broader administration. Thank you so much for the opportunity to be in community with you and to be part of today's virtual summit. Sí se puede.
Half a century after the passage of the landmark Civil Rights Act of 1964, economic inequality in the United States continues to be inextricably linked to both race and gender. Due to occupational segregation, workplace harassment and discrimination, as well as a lack of workplace protections, Latinas are amongst those most likely to face poverty and low wages. Although the number of Latinas in the labor force has jumped to 12.5 million, and while they account for more than 16% of the female labor force, Latina workers continue to face significant barriers. Pay inequity is most jarring within our community, with Latinas making 57 cents on the dollar compared to their white male counterparts. This is the largest wage gap experienced by any major racial or ethnic group in the United States. Latinas are also amongst those most likely defined as the working poor. In fact, nearly 1 in 10 Latinas working 27 hours or more a week are living below the poverty line. This is almost twice the rate of non-Hispanic white women. Although poverty amongst all Latinos has declined markedly, it remains high at 15.7%. The story is the same for Latino families headed by a single mom. At 28.7%, it remains amongst the highest experienced by any major racial or ethnic group. Not all news is bad, however. Although Latinas were hit particularly hard near the start of the pandemic, experienced a 23% decline in employment, these losses, driven in part by concentration in industries such as leisure and hospitality, have started to bounce back. Latinas' presence within the American labor force is also growing. Although our labor force participation has historically lagged that of other women, it is now at 56.4%, in line with rates for all women. Latina moms have also risen and now stand at 62.8%, just below the labor force participation rate for all moms. If we are to break the cycle for this generation of Latinas, as well as those to come, we must implement strategies that hardwire equity for women, particularly women of color and new Americans. Occupational segregation, a lack of representation in high-wage work, and an overrepresentation in low-wage work has relegated many Latinas to a chronic state of working poverty. We can and must work harder to close these gaps and create additional opportunities for this growing labor force.
Too many people don't believe paycheck inequality exists in 2021. That is something women faced in the 50s, 60s, or 70s, but not now. I'm here to tell you, sadly, that is wrong. Only a few years ago, I found out I had been a victim of gender pay discrimination. My male coworker with the same job title and duties was paid $6,000 more per year than I was. When you have multiple school loans, a car loan, and you live far away from family while earning less than $35,000 per year, that additional $6,000 really could have gone a long way. My male coworker has signed his contract fresh out of college. When I signed mine, I had 2 bachelor's degrees and a master's degree and a couple years of work experience under my belt. I'm also bilingual, which was a huge asset on the job. He was not. I found out about the pay difference not because my bosses owned up to it and tried to rectify it, but because a former coworker had begun her own investigation into the wage discrimination she too had suffered. When I learned about the discrimination I was facing and vaguely mentioned it on social media without naming any names, this former male colleague messaged the woman who originally told me about the pay gap and threatened to, quote, ruin our careers. So to those who say gender pay discrimination does not exist, that women are not under any kind of threat, I am telling you that I am not alone. Millions of women across the country are having the exact same experience that I had today in 2021. This happened to me just a few years ago, and last I checked, we still have not achieved gender equality in this country. Not even close. We have a lot more work to do.
For nearly 2 years, healthcare workers, including Latina nurses, have cared for people across our nation and around the world as we have all coped with the COVID-19 pandemic. They have rendered care with love to millions of people as they do in their daily work, but under much more difficult conditions. We are grateful for these nurses and for all healthcare professionals who have played such a critical role caring for us during this difficult time. As one of the co-founders of the Latinx House and Poderistas, I am proud to celebrate them and their contributions. As we lift them up, let's also make sure that we are pushing to ensure that they are being paid equally for their work and that they are being provided all of the support that they need. Poderistas is proud to contribute to this discussion as a proud Latina Equal Pay campaign partner, and we are very grateful for Procter & Gamble's help to make this possible, not to mention all that P&G does to champion Latinas across our country.
As Latina workers across the country, we have a pay gap. It's a reality. We're figuring out how to catch up. And that reality also, unfortunately, extends to the healthcare profession. I'll share some data with you here. It said that Latina nurses are paid 30% less than their non-Hispanic counterparts. And as we think about how we're going to address this pay gap and how we're going to attract Latinas to help take on some of these positions to fill the gap where we have a real crisis in our country of not having enough people to take these nursing jobs. Carmen, I'd love for you to share a little bit about what you think healthcare systems need to do to attract the candidates to take these positions while also addressing the reality that there's a pay disparity for Latina nurses in our country.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, honestly, and obviously, this pay gap needs to be addressed, and I think webinars like these and the National Association of Hispanic Nurses and Hispanic Star and all these other organizations are bringing it to light. And I think, when you become a nurse, when you become a Latinx, Hispanic nurse, go to these organizations and speak about pay, and do your research, right? Like, be like, well, you know what? I see that your entry level pay, speak to someone from HR, because I know for me, and going back to kind of like how can you get into this, right? Because a lot of our people do come from impoverished neighborhoods and circumstances, and it's like you don't see yourself in that, right? Because growing up, I didn't think I could be a nurse. I was like, oh my God, that's so fancy, right? I grew up in New York City, and I was able to get, financial aid, and then I did my research, and that's how I wound up in such a great institution, because I knew that this institution was going to provide me what I needed to continue my education, and they paid for me to get my master's, and I myself now, I'm a professor. And I think it's also about paying it forward and teaching the next generation and letting them know your worth, know your value, speak up for it. It could be a little daunting and a little scary to do that, up front. You can, attach yourself to a mentor who can help guide you and make sure that you're not that you're not in those shortcomings of the pay gap.
Yeah, thank you. Knowing our worth, we've got to know our worth. We have to feel strong enough to ask for people to pay us what we deserve. And we need to say that over and over again and not be shy about it. It's hard. We've got to say that to each other over and over again.
Hey friends, I am so honored to be here with all of you for this important summit and conversation. My name is Carmen Perez. As a former farm worker and daughter of migrant farm workers and an activist fighting for racial justice, I know too well how our community is impacted by injustice, including the gender discrimination that women often face. I know that we have the power to make great change, and we are using our power every single day to make change. I am a proud co-founder of Poderistas, which is an organization that centers the power of more than 30 million Latinas. I founded this organization with my sister, Monica Ramirez, and 8 other powerhouse Latinas, including our next speaker. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you Christine Habegger. She is an amazing entrepreneur, business leader. She has dedicated her work to ensure that Latinas and our stories are accurately represented in the entertainment industry. Christy is also the founder of Latina Magazine, and she has been working to help build power for the Latinx community across the country. Welcome, Christy.
Latinas are a force to be reckoned with in this country. We are more than 30 million people, and we are contributing in so many ways to this nation and this economy. Every day, we lift up our families, our communities, and our country. But even though we're leading in our homes and our workplaces and in so many other ways, our efforts haven't always been met with the rewards or benefits that we are owed. Our work hasn't been valued as it should. This is why we need to recognize Latina Equal Pay Day. The pay gap is just one example. We know there are others as well. Even so, Latinas continue to show up. We use our strength, our wisdom, our power, and our skills to make change, to create incredible companies, to build brands, and to hold up our entire nation. It's time that companies and political leaders and others begin to recognize the value, the power, and the potential of Latinas across this country. And Latinas, this is our time. This is the time to decide how we're going to use our collective energy to drive change across the nation. We need to continue to embrace our Latinidad, hoops, salsa, and all, as we take the lead to build what will be a more just and equitable economy for everyone.
Hi, everyone. On this Latina Equal Pay Day of Action, let's work to uplift one another and make sure that we build an economy that works for everyone. I'm Veronica Escobar, Congresswoman for El Paso, Texas, here to tell you that while we have made tremendous gains, the COVID pandemic unfortunately set us further back. 1 million Latinas left the workforce either because their job was eliminated or they had to stay home and help with their family. We need to make sure that we fight for an economy for them. But we have to fight also and especially for equal pay. That's why I'm a supporter of the Paycheck Fairness Act. that would ensure people get equal pay for equal work. Latinas, unfortunately, make only 57 cents for every dollar that a white man in America makes. That means Latinas have to work 10 extra months to earn the same thing that a white man earns in a year. It's fundamentally unfair, it's wrong, and it's unjust. I am with you not just today on this day of action, but every day as we fight for equality for all of us.
Majestuosa mitad del calor. Juntas seguimos su caminar y nuestros sueños alcanzar. No nos vamos a dejar, ya es tiempo de pelear. Yo soy la leona, lucho por mi gente. Igualdad, mi corazón y mi mente son lo más fuerte, voy a triunfar. Las leonas escuchan su rugir, saben que lo mejor está por venir. Juntas seguimos su caminar y nuestros sueños alcanzar. No nos vamos a dejar, ya es tiempo de pelear. Yo soy la leona, lucho por mi gente, igualdad, mi corazón y mi mente son lo más fuerte, voy a triunfar.
Si nos unimos como leonas, podemos llegar hasta lo más alto.
Wow, what an impactful program. Thank you so much to everyone who shared their wisdom and all of their knowledge about this topic. As we mentioned, today is Latina Equal Pay Day, the day that Latinas finally catch up to what white male workers were paid in one calendar year. And we've heard from incredible speakers who have helped to enlighten us. They've also inspired us, and they have given us a call to action. Thank you to the performers who helped make this event as special as it's been. We'd also like to thank our partners. We have so many partners who've worked hard on this event. Of course, thank you to Equal Pay Today, Equal Rights Advocates, to our friends at LACLA, and to all the many partners that have signed on to support this event. This event would not be possible if it were not for our sponsors. So huge thanks to the sponsors who've made today's event possible. And we know that our work is not over. This is the start of the conversation for today, but there's still more. We need you all to participate in the National Social Media Storm, which will take place at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And following that, there's a segment on the impact of COVID on essential women workers, many of whom are Latinas. So stay engaged, stay tuned, and take action.
That's right, Monica. And a big thank you to you, and to Justice for Migrant Women, and to today's MC, Chelsea Rendon, and to all of our performers for making the observation of this day truly special. Make sure to continue the conversation throughout the day using the hashtags Latina Equal Pay and Latinas Can't Wait. And remember to head on over to the Essential Women Worker Summit hosted by equal rights advocates and Justice for Migrant Women. And let's raise our voice, get loud, and let's make some change.
As we have heard today, Latinas cannot wait any longer. I have been reminded of the tremendous amount of work left to be done, but also feel confident in our ability to come together and demand what we have rightfully earned. We thank you for your time, and we hope that you will join us again next year. Stay connected to the topic as the Essential Women Worker Summit is up next at the link on the screen, presented by equal rights advocates, Justice for Migrant Women, and Parent Voices. It'll be hosted this evening by Melina Bobadilla, Chicana actor, educator, and activist from Los Angeles, known for her roles on Orange is the New Black and the upcoming season of Gentified, as well as her commitment to the Latinx community and our representation across media. And make sure to join us in raising public awareness about the pay gap for Latinas on social media, starting at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific time, as we #demand more, because #Latinas can't wait. Thank you again so much.